The small-town mechanic fixes CEO's car for free, unknowingly acing a secret job interview that would change the trajectory of both their lives forever. In the soft glow of a fading autumn day, Jack Miller wiped his grease-stained hands on a rag that had seen better days. Just like everything else in Oak Ridge, the open sign flickered intermittently. Another thing on his endless list of repairs, casting sporadic light across the weathered concrete of Miller's auto shop. 38 years old with lines etched deeper than his age warranted, Jack moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent decades learning the language of broken engines. His father's shop, now his for the past 5 years since Dad's heart gave out, stood as the last vestige of a promise he'd made to a dying man. Keep it running, no matter what. Closing in 20, he called to nobody in particular. His sole employee, Miguel, had left early to attend his daughter's school play. The empty garage echoed Jack's words back to him, a reminder of how things had been lately. Hollow, with business dwindling as the economy of their small Pennsylvania town continued its slow collapse. Jack glanced at the framed photo on his cluttered desk. Himself as a boy, grinning wide with a missing front tooth, standing beside his father who proudly displayed the Miller and Son sign they'd hung together. The and Son part had been aspirational then, his father's way of cementing Jack's future before he'd even understood what that meant. The shop phone rang, jarring him from his thoughts. Jack considered letting it go to voicemail. It was nearly closing time, and he'd promised his sister he'd watch his nephew tonight so she could pick up an extra shift at the diner. But 20 years of his father's lectures about customer service had ingrained habits he couldn't break. Miller's Auto, he answered, his voice carrying the weight of the day. Hello? The voice on the other end was crisp, cultured. I'm stranded about 2 miles outside of town. My car just died. I was wondering if... Address? Jack cut in, reaching for a pen. He didn't mean to be curt, but every minute now pushed him later for his sister. After jotting down the location, Jack grabbed his tow truck keys. Sit tight. I'll be there in 10. The drive out of town took Jack past familiar landmarks that told the story of Oak Ridge's decline. The shuttered textile mill that once employed half the town, the row of empty storefronts on Main Street, the for sale signs that had become permanent fixtures in front yards. Each sight stoked the quiet resentment that had been building in him for years. Not at any person, but at circumstances, at the unstoppable forces that had hollowed out communities like his across the country. Jack spotted the car before he saw its owner, a sleek black Tesla Model S, looking as out of place on this rural road as a spaceship in a cornfield. Beside it stood a man in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Jack earned in a month, talking intently on a phone while pacing. As the tow truck pulled up, the man ended his call and turned. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and the trim physique of someone who paid good money to maintain it. His face was all angles, framed by designer glasses that caught the last light of day. Mr. Miller? The man extended his hand. Daniel Harrington. Thank you for coming out so late. Jack shook his hand briefly, already moving toward the Tesla. Just Jack is fine. What happened before it stopped? Warning light came on, then everything just shut down. Harrington gestured vaguely. I was on my way to a meeting in Pittsburgh when GPS rerouted me through your town due to an accident on the interstate. Then this. Jack nodded, popping the front trunk. The frunk, as Tesla owners called it. He'd only worked on a handful of these, mostly belonging to wealthy weekenders who maintained summer homes in the Lakes region nearby. But cars were cars, regardless of their price tag or the technology crammed inside them. After a methodical examination, Jack straightened up. Coolant system failure. Could be the pump. Could be something else. Won't know until I get it back to the shop and run diagnostics. Harrington checked his watch. A Rolex, Jack noted without surprise. How long will that take? Diagnosis? Tonight. Repair? Depends what parts we need and how fast we can get them. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. Jack didn't sugarcoat it. He'd learned long ago that honesty up front saved headaches later. The man's jaw tightened briefly before he nodded. I understand. Is there a hotel in town? The Oak Ridge Inn, Jack said, securing the Tesla to the tow truck. Nothing fancy, but it's clean. 2 blocks from my shop. I can drop you there. The ride back to town passed mostly in silence. Jack wasn't much for small talk, and Harrington seemed preoccupied with his phone, typing rapidly with occasional sighs of frustration. Only when they pulled up to the small 2-story building with its quaint Oak Ridge Inn sign did Harrington look up. My meeting tomorrow is crucial, he said, pocketing his phone. Is there any way at all you could prioritize this repair? There was something in the man's voice. Not entitlement, as Jack might have expected, but a note of genuine concern. Jack thought of his sister waiting, of his nephew who'd be disappointed, and of his bank account that had been hovering too close to empty for comfort. I'll see what I can do, he said finally. Can't make promises, but I'll take a look tonight. Relief washed over Harrington's face. I appreciate that more than you know. He reached for his wallet, but Jack waved him off. Pay me when it's fixed. Shop's just down Main Street, you can't miss it. I'll call when I know something. After dropping Harrington at the inn, Jack called his sister. The disappointment in her voice as he explained the situation cut deep, but she understood. She always did. That was part of what made it worse. Back at the shop, Jack flipped the sign to closed, but left the lights on. He'd told Miguel not to come in tomorrow. Couldn't afford to pay him for a full day with how business had been, which meant whatever Jack discovered tonight, he'd be handling alone. The Tesla's diagnostic system connected to his computer, throwing up a series of error codes. Jack rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of fatigue settling in his shoulders. It was going to be a long night. 3 hours later, surrounded by manuals and parts catalogs, Jack had identified the problem. A faulty connection in the cooling system that had triggered a cascade of safety shutdowns. The good news was that he could fix it. The bad news was that the replacement part would normally take days to arrive. Jack sat back in his chair, considering his options. In the back room, buried in boxes of parts his father had accumulated over decades, Jack remembered seeing components from a hybrid vehicle that might, with some modification, serve as a temporary fix. Not factory standard, certainly not what Tesla would recommend, but enough to get Harrington to Pittsburgh and back to wherever he came from. By 2 a.m., with hands cramped from detailed work, Jack had successfully adapted the part and installed it. The Tesla's systems came back online, running a self-diagnostic that showed all clear. It wasn't pretty, but it would hold. Jack slumped in exhaustion, knowing he should call Harrington but deciding it could wait until morning. He stretched out on the ancient couch in his office, not the first time he'd spent the night there, and was asleep before he could even kick off his boots. The insistent buzzing of his phone woke him at 6:30 a.m. Disoriented, Jack fumbled for it, squinting at the screen. His sister. Sorry, he mumbled, voice thick with sleep. Late night. Car's fixed, though. I'll take Tommy this weekend instead, promise. After reassuring her, Jack stood, his back protesting the uncomfortable night. He splashed water on his face in the small bathroom, trying to look somewhat presentable before calling his client. Harrington answered on the first ring. Any news? Car's fixed, Jack said. You can pick it up whenever you're ready. There was a pause. That's remarkable. I was expecting days of delay. Jack shrugged, then remembered Harrington couldn't see him. Got lucky with parts. I'll explain when you get here. 20 minutes later, Harrington walked through the door of Miller's Auto, looking refreshed in a different suit, this one navy blue, and carrying a leather briefcase. The contrast between his polished appearance and the worn-down shop was almost comical. Mr. Miller, he began, then corrected himself. Jack, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. Jack led him to the Tesla, explaining the repairs in straightforward terms, including his improvised solution. Rather than being concerned about the non-standard part, Harrington seemed impressed. Innovative? He commented, circling the car. Most mechanics would have simply ordered the factory part and left me stranded for days. Most mechanics don't have 40 years of my dad's hoarding to draw from, Jack said with a small smile. It's temporary, though. I'd recommend getting the proper replacement once you're back home. Harrington nodded, then asked, What do I owe you? Jack had deliberated on this while waiting. The parts were minimal, but the labor had been extensive. Standard rates would put this repair at several $100s. But something, perhaps pride, perhaps the genuine gratitude in Harrington's eyes, made Jack say, No charge. Consider it Oak Ridge hospitality. Harrington stared at him. That's not necessary. I know this took considerable time and skill. It did, Jack agreed. But sometimes, he trailed off, not quite sure how to explain his reasoning. Let's just say I've been where you were, stuck, needing to get somewhere important. Pay it forward sometime. For a long moment, Harrington studied Jack with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. Then extending his hand, he said, Thank you. Truly. As they shook hands, Jack noticed the man's eyes moving around the shop, taking in the worn equipment, the outdated computer system, the patches in the roof. Been in business long? Harrington asked casually. Shop's been here 50 years. My dad started it. I took over 5 years ago when he passed. And before that, the question caught Jack off guard. Most customers didn't care about his history. Worked here since high school. Took some community college courses in automotive technology. Did a stint in the Army, vehicle maintenance. Came back here after. Harrington nodded as if confirming something to himself. Your father taught you well. He did. Jack agreed, a familiar ache of loss momentarily tightening his chest. After Harrington left, promising to recommend the shop to anyone passing through Oak Ridge, Jack turned his attention to the day's scheduled work, an oil change and a brake pad replacement. Mundane after the challenge of the Tesla, but it was paying work. The rest of the week passed uneventfully. Jack called Miguel back in for Friday and Saturday, their busiest days, though busy was relative these days. By closing time Saturday, Jack had almost forgotten about the Tesla and its owner. Until Monday morning, when a sleek black town car pulled up outside the shop just as Jack was unlocking the door. The driver emerged first, opening the rear door. And out stepped Daniel Harrington, this time in a more casual outfit of slacks and a button-down shirt. No tie. Mr. Miller? He called, striding forward with purpose. Do you have a moment to talk? Confused, Jack nodded, leading him inside. Car giving you trouble again? Not at all. Your repair held perfectly. Harrington settled into the chair across from Jack's desk. I'm here on a different matter. He placed his business card on the desk. Jack picked it up, reading, Daniel Harrington, CEO, Precision Technologies. Precision Technologies, Jack repeated. The manufacturing company? The same. Harrington leaned forward. We're expanding our automotive division, opening a new facility just outside Pittsburgh. I've been interviewing potential heads of maintenance for months without success. Jack set the card down, beginning to understand where this was going. Last week wasn't just a breakdown, Harrington continued. It was the most effective job interview I've ever conducted. Completely unintentional on my part, I assure you. Job interview, Jack echoed, the words feeling strange in his mouth. I watched you solve a complex problem with limited resources, demonstrate exceptional skill under pressure, and show integrity by not price gouging a stranded stranger in an expensive car. Harrington's eyes held Jack steadily. Then I had our HR department do some background research. Your military record is exemplary. Your technical certifications are precisely what we need. Jack sat back, stunned. You're offering me a job, head of maintenance for our new facility. Full benefits, relocation assistance. Salary that's... Harrington named a figure that made Jack blink twice to ensure he'd heard correctly. And potential for advancement. The offer hung in the air between them. Jack's mind raced, calculating, considering. It was more money than he'd ever dreamed of making in Oak Ridge. A fresh start. Security. But there was the shop. His father's legacy. His promise. I appreciate the offer, Jack said slowly. But this place, it's been in my family for generations. I can't just walk away. Harrington nodded as if he'd anticipated this response. I understand family obligation, Jack. More than you might think. But consider this. Is keeping a struggling business alive what your father would have wanted for you? Or would he have wanted you to use the skills he taught you to build something better? The question struck Jack like a physical blow. For 5 years, he'd interpreted his promise to his father in the most literal sense. Keep the shop's doors open, no matter the cost. But what if that wasn't what Dad had meant at all? I need time to think, Jack said finally. Of course. Harrington stood, leaving a folder on the desk. All the details are in here. The position remains open until the end of the month. Call me when you decide. After Harrington left, Jack sat motionless, staring at the folder. Thought of leaving Oak Ridge had never seriously crossed his mind. This town, for all its flaws and fading glory, was home. The people knew him. He knew exactly what each day would bring. But that was part of the problem, wasn't it? The predictability, the slow decline, the constant struggle to keep the lights on. That evening, Jack took the folder to his sister's house. Karen, 3 years younger and infinitely wiser in Jack's estimation, listened without interruption as he explained the offer. Her small living room, cluttered with her 9-year-old son's toys, felt like the war room for a life-changing decision. It's an incredible opportunity, she said when he finished. But you're worried about the shop. Dad wanted me to keep it going, Jack said, the familiar refrain even sounding hollow to his own ears now. Karen reached for his hand. Jack, Dad wanted you to be happy. To use your talents. The shop was his dream, not necessarily yours. What about you and Tommy? I can't just leave you here. A sad smile crossed her face. We've been holding you back for years, haven't we? Using you as our safety net. That's not... It is. she interrupted gently. And it's time to stop. Tommy and I will be fine. Maybe this is what all of us need. A push to move forward. Later that night, alone in his small apartment above the shop, Jack pulled out the most treasured possession he owned, his father's worn leather journal. He'd rarely looked at it since the funeral, finding the handwriting too painful a reminder of what he'd lost. But tonight he turned to the last entries, written in a shakier hand as illness had taken its toll. There in his father's distinctive scrawl, dated just a week before he died. Talked to Jack about the shop today. Told him to keep it running. Saw the weight settle on his shoulders right away. Maybe I said it wrong. What I meant was, keep using what I taught you. Keep fixing what's broken. Keep helping people who are stuck. The shop is just a building. The skill, the integrity, that's the real Miller legacy. Jack closed the journal, tears blurring his vision. All this time, he'd been honoring the letter of his promise while missing its spirit entirely. The next morning, Jack called Harrington. I'll take the job, he said without preamble. But I have a condition. I'm listening, Harrington replied. I need 30 days to sort things out here. Find a buyer for the shop if possible. Make sure my family has arrangements. Completely reasonable. We don't need you to start until the facility is closer to completion anyway. Take the time you need. That evening, Jack called a meeting at Karen's house with Miguel and his wife Rosa. Over pizza and beer, he laid out his plans and an offer. Miguel, you've been wanting to open your own shop for years, Jack said. I'm offering to sell you this one at a price you can handle, with payments spread over time. You know the customers, you know the business. Miguel looked stunned. Jack, I can't afford. Yes, you can, Jack insisted. With the payment structure I'm suggesting, your monthly cost will be less than renting a new space. Rosa's accounting skills can help modernize the books. You can keep the Miller name or change it. That's up to you. The couple exchanged glances. Years of shared dreams suddenly within reach. Why would you do this? Miguel asked. Jack thought of his father's journal, of Harrington's unexpected offer, of the strange twist that had led him to this moment. Because sometimes fixing things isn't about keeping them the same, he said. It's about making them work better for the future. The next 30 days passed in a blur of paperwork, planning, and goodbyes. Jack helped Miguel secure a small business loan to cover the initial payment. They updated the shop's signage to Rodriguez and Miller Auto, a compromise Miguel had insisted on. Your father's legacy stays, he'd said firmly. Karen decided to use Jack's departure as her own catalyst for change. With his help, she applied to a nursing program in Pittsburgh, a dream she'd deferred when she became a single mother. They found an affordable apartment halfway between Jack's new job and her future school. The evening before they were set to leave, Jack stood alone in the empty shop. The equipment remained, now Miguel's responsibility. But the photos, the memories, the small tokens of his father's life, those were packed carefully in boxes. As he turned off the lights one final time, Jack felt a strange mixture of loss and anticipation. He wasn't abandoning his father's legacy. He was expanding it in ways Dad might never have imagined. The following morning, with Karen and Tommy in his truck and a small U-Haul trailing behind, Jack pulled away from Oak Ridge. In his rearview mirror, he could see the newly painted Rodriguez and Miller Auto sign gleaming in the morning sun, a bridge between past and future. 3 months later, Jack stood in the massive maintenance bay of Precision Technologies' new automotive facility. State-of-the-art equipment surrounded him, along with a team of 16 technicians he'd personally hired and trained. The facility would officially open next week, producing specialized components for electric and hybrid vehicles. Quite a change from your shop in Oak Ridge, Harrington commented, appearing beside him. Jack nodded, taking in the expanse of the operation. In some ways, the principles are the same, though. Identify the problem, find the solution, make it work. Precisely why I hired you, Harrington said with satisfaction. How's your sister adjusting? Good. Her nursing program is intense, but she's thriving. Tommy's made friends at his new school. And you? Any regrets? Jack considered the question seriously. I miss the simplicity sometimes, with knowing every customer by name. But this, he gestured to the facility around them. This is something my dad never got to do. Build something from the ground up. Harrington's phone buzzed with a message. After checking it, he turned back to Jack with an enigmatic smile. Speaking of building things, there's someone I'd like you to meet. A potential client visiting from Japan, very interested in our maintenance protocols. He led Jack to a conference room where a distinguished Japanese businessman waited, along with several assistants. After introductions, the conversation turned technical, with Jack explaining the innovative maintenance systems he'd implemented. The visitors seemed particularly interested in Jack's background. "Mr. Harrington tells me you owned your own repair shop before joining Precision. That's unusual for someone in your position." "It gave me perspective," Jack replied, understanding both sides. The small garage with limited resources and now this facility with everything cutting edge helps me create systems that work in real-world conditions. The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of future collaboration. As the visitors departed, Harrington turned to Jack with undisguised pride. "You just helped secure a contract worth millions," he said. "Your perspective, as you put it, is exactly what convinced them we understand the practical applications of our technology, not just the theory." That evening, Jack drove to the small house he'd recently purchased. Nothing extravagant, but with a yard for Tommy to play in and a separate apartment in the basement where Karen could have independence once she finished school. As he pulled into the driveway, he saw Tommy racing toward the truck, waving a paper in his hand. "Uncle Jack, look what I made in art class." Jack examined the colorful drawing, a figure in blue coveralls standing beside what appeared to be a car, with "My Hero" written across the top in a child's uneven letters. "That's me?" Tommy nodded enthusiastically. "I told everyone my uncle fixes things nobody else can fix. My teacher asked what kind of things, and I said everything, because you do, right?" Jack felt a lump form in his throat. "I try, buddy. I definitely try." Later, after Tommy was in bed, Jack sat with Karen on the back porch, sharing a quiet moment before she needed to study. "I got a call from Miguel today," he said. "Business is picking up at the shop. They're thinking of hiring another mechanic." Karen smiled. "See? Everything worked out. The shop's thriving. We're building new lives here, and you," she nudged his shoulder, "you're finally using all that talent Dad always bragged about." "I miss him," Jack said softly. "Wish he could see all this." "He can," Karen replied with certainty. "And he's probably telling everyone who'll listen, 'That's my boy.'" Jack gazed up at the stars, brighter here outside the city than they'd been in town. 6 months ago, he couldn't have imagined this life. A broken-down Tesla, an act of kindness, and an unexpected opportunity had changed everything. In his father's journal, which now sat on his bedside table, Jack had recently found another entry that seemed almost prophetic. "The best mechanics know that sometimes what looks like a breakdown is actually the beginning of a rebuild." True for cars. True for lives too. Jack had fixed a car for free, unknowingly acing a job interview. But the real repair, the one that mattered most, had been to his own life, his sister's future, and his father's legacy. Not by keeping things the same, but by having the courage to transform them into something new. Some breakdowns, it turned out, were exactly what you needed to find your way forward.